I never imagined stumbling upon metal spikes in Grandma Eleanor's driveway. Yet when the HOA began zeroing in on her charming blue cottage, and I uncovered her secret double life as a seasoned senior prosecutor focused on real estate fraud, I realized this wasn't mere harassment. It was payback for the case she was meticulously building against them. What would these crooked officials do once they learned their real target was the one investigating them? I pulled up to Grandma Eleanor's driveway with my suitcase and a box of her favorite donuts. The blue cottage, with its crisp white trim, nestled among towering pines, exactly as it had during all those childhood summers, except for one jarring detail. A bright orange paper fluttering in the wind clung to her front door like a gaudy warning. My stomach sank as I snatched up the paper. Violation notice. Unapproved exterior paint. Color must be changed within 72 hours. It made no sense. Grandma's cottage had been this same sky blue for as long as I could remember. Welcome to Pinecrest Village. A sugary sweet voice called out from next door. A woman with flawlessly highlighted blonde hair stood at the property line, arms crossed over her designer blouse. I'm Karen Thompson, chair of the HOA Community Standards Committee. I forced a smile. Hi, I'm Jamie, Eleanor's grandchild. I'm house-sitting while she recovers from surgery. Karen's smile never quite reached her eyes. Such a shame about Eleanor. We've been neighbors for what, 5 years now? The rules clearly state that all exterior paint colors need committee approval. She glanced at the cottage with obvious disapproval. That blue was grandfathered in. But once a property needs repainting, it must match our approved palette. Mostly earth tones, you understand. I studied the cottage once more. The paint wasn't peeling or faded. It looked freshly done. Our inspector noted significant fading on the west wall, Karen stated, her tone exuding smug certainty that made my skin crawl. The violation stands for 72 hours, or fines will start at $100 a day. As she strode away, I caught a glimpse of her husband, Robert, watching from the porch before he quickly slipped indoors. Stepping inside Grandma's cottage, I was met with a sense of warm familiarity. The handmade quilts, a bookshelf crammed with mystery novels, and the faint whiff of cinnamon. I dialed her immediately at the rehab center. Jamie, sweetheart, I'm so glad you're there. Her voice, weary yet resolute, greeted me. When I mentioned the violation notice, she sighed heavily. That's the third notice this month. First, it was about my roses growing too close to the sidewalk, then my mailbox being non-standard despite it being the original one. But you've owned this cottage for decades, I said, confused. How can they suddenly enforce these rules now? She asked. That's what happens when developers take over the HOA board. Richard Vaughn became president 6 months ago. He's a lawyer for Pinnacle Development Group. They've been snapping up properties all over Pinecrest, tearing down older homes to replace them with massive modern structures that sell for triple the price. I glanced out the window at Karen's house, a massive grey and white structure that dwarfed Grandma's cottage. Let me guess. Exactly. The Thompsons are connected to Pinnacle. Robert Thompson is their CEO, Grandma confirmed. They're targeting my lot because it sits on the corner with a creek view, a perfect spot for their biggest model home. A chill ran down my spine despite the balmy June air. I'll handle this, Grandma. Just focus on getting better. After hanging up, I ventured into the backyard to inspect the property. I noticed that several of Grandma's prized rose bushes had been crudely hacked back, not pruned as she would have done. Then, as I circled around to inspect the supposedly faded west wall, which appeared perfectly intact, my foot struck something in the gravel driveway. Bending down, my blood turned cold. Partially embedded in the gravel were metal spikes. Not merely one, but several, positioned precisely where tires would tread. I carefully retrieved them using a garden glove I found in Grandma's shed. These weren't random bits of junk. They were caltrops engineered to puncture tires. Someone had deliberately placed them in my grandmother's driveway. That night, sleep eluded me. I couldn't shake the thoughts of violation notices, the mutilated roses, and those menacing metal spikes. This wasn't simple harassment or strict rule enforcement. It felt orchestrated, intentional, a campaign to make Grandma Eleanor so miserable she'd be forced to sell her beloved cottage. I spent hours on my laptop poring over Pinecrest Village HOA regulations. The rulebook spanned over 200 pages, yet nowhere did it mandate approved paint colors or state that grandfathered properties must conform to new standards. In fact, Section 12.4 explicitly safeguarded historic properties from retroactive changes, and Grandma's cottage, built in 1932, undoubtedly qualified. Around midnight, headlights washed across the living room wall as a car crept slowly past the cottage. I peered through the curtains to see a black SUV with dimmed lights halting briefly in front of Grandma's house before moving on. I snapped several photos as it turned around at the end of the cul-de-sac. The partially visible license plate confirmed my suspicions with the letters PNCL1 on its vanity plate. What were they doing watching the house at midnight? Suddenly, the violation notice seemed like the least of my worries. The morning brought another unwelcome surprise. Overnight, the cottage's mailbox had been smashed, bent at a strange angle as if struck by something heavy. Tucked inside was another orange notice, this one citing improper yard maintenance. I documented everything with photos before straightening the mailbox as best I could. This was absurd. While returning indoors, Karen Thompson appeared in the front yard, ostentatiously watering plants as she watched me. "Terrible about that mailbox," she remarked. "Those local teens can be so destructive. You really should replace it with one of our approved models." "I have a catalog if you need it." I forced calm. "Thanks, but I'll just repair it. It's an original feature of the property." Karen's smile tightened. "Damaged mailboxes are a violation. The committee will have to issue another notice if it isn't replaced properly. I've had enough of these issues. I'll be sure to bring all these violations up at the next HOA meeting." "When is that, by the way?" Something flickered in her eyes. Was it worry? "Not for 3 weeks, but Richard can handle emergencies at any time. In fact, I'm meeting him this afternoon. If you'd like, I can mention your situation myself," she offered. I turned back toward the cottage. Inside, I paced the modest living room, trying to piece together everything. Why was the HOA suddenly gunning for my grandmother? What did Karen mean by accelerate the timeline? And most pressing, who had planted those tire spikes in the driveway? I resolved to confront this Richard Vaughan character face to face. According to the HOA website, the office was open from 1 to 4 p.m. at the community center. I had questions that demanded answers, and a growing suspicion that something was deeply amiss in Pinecrest Village. The Pinecrest Village Community Center gleamed with fresh paint and immaculate landscaping, a stark contrast to the harsh enforcement aimed at Grandma's humble cottage. I pushed through the glass doors, clutching a folder filled with violation notices, photos of the tire spikes, and printouts of the HOA regulations I'd studied overnight. A receptionist with a plastic smile directed me down a hallway toward the HOA office. Peeking through a partially open door, I could hear Karen Thompson's high, insistent voice. "We need to move quickly on the Curtis property. I heard she's been asking questions at the county records office." I froze outside, straining to hear more. "Patience, Karen," replied a smooth, confident male voice. "The assessment increase goes into effect next week. Between that and the violations, she'll be financially ruined by month's end. Just then, the door swung open abruptly and two faces turned toward me with identical expressions of surprise, quickly masked by professional smiles. Karen recovered first, rising from her chair behind a large mahogany desk. Behind it sat a middle-aged man in an expensive golf shirt, his tanned face marked with practiced charm. "Jamie, what a coincidence!" Karen trilled. "I was just discussing your grandmother's situation with our HOA president, Richard Vaughan." Richard stood and extended his hand. "A pleasure to meet Eleanor's grandchild. We're all concerned about her property falling into disrepair while she's away." His handshake was firm, his smile meticulously rehearsed. I noticed a framed photo on his desk showing him shaking hands with Robert Thompson in front of a banner reading, "Pinnacle Development Group, building tomorrow's Pinecrest today." "Funny you mentioned disrepair," I said. Pulling out the tire spikes I'd collected, I carefully set them on his polished desk. "I found these deliberately planted in my grandmother's driveway yesterday." Richard's smile didn't waver, but his eyes darkened. "That's concerning, but vandalism is a police matter, not an HOA issue." I lied smoothly. "I've already filed a police report. They're checking nearby security cameras. I thought you should know since it happened right after that first violation notice." Karen's face paled slightly. "Are you implying something?" Richard asked. I opened my folder and laid out the violation notices. "I'm implying these notices reference rules that don't exist in your published regulations. Section 12.4 clearly exempts historic properties like my grandmother's cottage from retroactive changes." For a fleeting moment, Richard's professional demeanor faltered. "The board recently voted to remove those exemptions without notifying homeowners," I pressed. "That violates state law regarding HOA governance," I countered, silently thanking my late-night research. "The notifications are being processed," Richard dismissed. "Now, if there's nothing else, Karen and I have business to discuss." "Actually, there is something else." I pulled out one more document, a property map of Pinecrest Village with Grandma's corner lot highlighted. "I'm curious why Pinnacle Development submitted building plans for my grandmother's property 3 months ago when she never expressed interest in selling." The silence was deafening. Finally, Richard's mask slipped, revealing cold calculation in his eyes. "Those plans were speculative," he admitted. "Pinnacle often drafts concepts for various properties to streamline development if owners decide to sell." "Interesting approach," I replied, "especially when combined with targeted harassment that could pressure homeowners to sell." Karen abruptly stood. "That's an outrageous accusation. The HOA simply enforces community standards equally for everyone." "Really? Then you won't mind if I request records of all violations issued in the past 6 months. Public records laws apply to HOAs in this state." Richard's jaw tightened. "Submit your request in writing. We'll respond within the legally required 30 days. I smiled thinly. "I already did," I said, producing a certified mail receipt. "Sent it yesterday to both the HOA office and the State Housing Authority." Their reactions were telling. Karen's face flushed red, while Richard's cool facade revealed a pulsing vein at his temple. "We're done here," Richard declared firmly. "If you have concerns, bring them to the next board meeting like everyone else." As I turned to leave, he added, "By the way, the board approved a special assessment for corner properties last month. Your grandmother will receive notice of a $300 monthly increase starting next week for infrastructure improvements." The threat was thinly veiled. "Back off, or it would only worsen." I maintained a neutral expression, despite the anger simmering inside. I'll make sure she gets the notice, and I'll forward a copy to the housing authority. Outside in the parking lot, I leaned against my car, my hands trembling slightly from the confrontation. This was more than harassment. It was a systematic, organized effort to force people from their homes. Glancing back at the community center, I spotted Karen watching me through a window, phone pressed to her ear. I needed allies and answers. Grandma had lived in Pinecrest Village for 30 years. She must have friends who'd seen similar pressure. As I pulled away, a silver sedan began tailing me. It maintained a steady distance as I zigzagged through random streets, only abandoning me when I headed toward the police station. My phone rang from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Is this Eleanor Curtis's grandchild?" a woman's voice asked, hushed and nervous. "Yes, this is Jamie. Who's calling?" "My name is Sofia Ramirez. I live across the street from your grandmother. Don't return to the cottage right now. They're watching it. Meet me at the Riverside Cafe in 20 minutes. I have information about what's happening to Eleanor and the others." "Others?" I echoed, my concern deepening. "Your grandmother isn't the only target," Sophia confirmed, "but she might be the one to finally put an end to it if you help her." 20 minutes! Come alone!" The line went dead. I sat in my idling car, wondering if it was a trap or a genuine plea for help. Either way, I needed answers. As I turned toward downtown and the Riverside Cafe, one nagging question persisted. What did Grandma know that made her so crucial in stopping them? I stepped on shattered glass. A broken flower pot thrown through Grandma's window lay beneath my feet. Wrapped around a rock was a note that read, "Sell now, or face worse." My hands trembled with fury. "This isn't just neighborly squabbling anymore, it's criminal," Mr. Washington called from across the street. He pointed to his doorbell camera. "I got that on video, if you need it." I nodded gratefully and hurried back inside. I needed Grandma's property papers to counter the HOA's claims about the blue paint. Her study was meticulously neat, though packed with boxes labeled by year. In one corner, a small filing cabinet with a heavy padlock I'd never noticed stood ominously. As rain began to pour, I scoured for the key. Lightning flashed through the window, briefly illuminating Grandma's key ring on her desk. A tiny golden gavel dangled from it, a peculiar charm I'd always found intriguing. On a hunch, I tried it in the padlock. It clicked open. Inside weren't just property documents. The top folder read, "Pinnacle Development Group Evidence File." My heart raced as I flipped through photos of Richard Vaughan shaking hands with men in expensive suits, bank statements, secret recordings, and maps of neighborhoods with certain properties circled in red. "What are you doing with my case files?" I startled at Grandma's voice on my phone. I must have hit speed dial by accident. "Grandma, why do you have investigation files on Karen's husband's company?" I whispered. A moment of silence ensued before her tone grew steely. "Jamie, listen carefully. That file box holds evidence I've spent 2 years gathering. I'm not just a retired school teacher who bakes cookies and tends a garden." Her voice, once gentle, turned authoritative. "I'm Senior Prosecutor Eleanor Curtis, White Collar Crime Division. My hip surgery was just a cover while I build this case." I sank into her chair, stunned. "The Pinnacle Company, they're targeting homes here across 3 counties. They push out elderly residents with bogus HOA violations so they can buy low. The properties are inexpensive. Richard handles the legal maneuvering while Karen scouts vulnerable targets." Her voice dropped. "They've done this to 26 senior citizens already. I moved here undercover when I noticed the pattern." I stared at the photos sprawled across the desk. "That's why they're after your cottage. They don't know who I am, but they covet my property for its lake access. I've been gathering evidence. A thunderous crash from downstairs cut her off. Peering through the blinds, I saw Karen's SUV speeding away. Downstairs, the living room window lay shattered, rain cascading over broken glass. "Jamie, what happened?" Grandma's voice came through the phone I'd dropped on the desk. Rushing back upstairs, I noticed a folder missing from the box, the main evidence file. My heart sank as I grabbed the phone. "Someone broke in," she said. "I think they took your case file. Check the blue book on the third shelf." I pulled down an old cookbook to find it hollowed out, containing a USB drive and backup files. "Always keep copies," Grandma advised. "Now you're in danger. They've seen you there, and they'll assume you're in on it." Just then, the car door banged outside. Through the window, I spotted Richard Vaughan striding toward the cottage, phone to his ear, with Karen's SUV idling at the curb. "They're here," I whispered. "Back door now," Grandma commanded over the phone. "Take the files to Sophia Ramirez at 156 Maple. She's been helping me build the case." The doorbell rang, followed by aggressive knocking. "Jamie, open up. We need to discuss the additional violations on your grandmother's property," Richard's booming voice declared. I grabbed the remaining files and the USB, shoving them into my backpack as the knocking intensified. "One more thing," Grandma urged. In her bedroom closet, behind the shoe rack, the front door splintered open with a crash as heavy footsteps entered the cottage. "I have to go," I whispered, ending the call. The back door lay just down the hallway. If I moved quietly enough, I might escape. I crept from the study, the backpack clutched tight against my chest. "Check upstairs," I heard Richard say. "Find those documents." Footsteps echoed on the stairs as I edged toward the back door. My hand hovered over the knob when Karen's voice halted me. "Going somewhere?" she asked, her smile failing to mask the tension in her eyes. "I was just watering the plants, as your grandmother asked," I lied, striving for innocence, despite the bulging backpack. Karen's gaze narrowed as she blocked my path. "Then you won't mind if we check what's in that bag," she said, reaching for it. The air was thick with unspoken threats, and I knew that every word now mattered. And now, Richard discovered them on the lower level. My heart hammered in my chest. I needed a diversion immediately. I feigned a misstep, toppling a vase that shattered on the floor while Karen recoiled from the cascade of glass. I dashed past her, forcefully opening the screen door and sprinting across the sodden lawn. I had to stop her. Karen's scream echoed behind me. Rain drenched me as I dashed between houses, mud splashing up my legs. I wasn't sure where 156 Maple was, but I had to put distance between us first. Richard's furious shouts diminished as I cut through a neighbor's yard and crouched behind a garden shed. Catching my breath, I retrieved my phone to look up Sophia's address. The map pinpointed Maple Street, merely 2 blocks away. Just as I steeled myself to run again, a text buzzed from an unknown number. "Behind you! Don't scream! I'm a friend!" I spun around to see an elderly woman with steely grey hair clutching an umbrella. "Sophia Ramirez," she murmured. "Eleanor texted me." "Come quickly." She ushered me through a maze of backyard shortcuts toward a quaint yellow house, boasting a lovely garden. Once inside, Sophia secured 3 deadbolts. "Welcome to Resistance Headquarters," she said, gesturing toward a dining room where 3 other seniors sat around a table strewn with maps and documents. A tall, white-haired man stood. "Judge Marcus Johnson." "Retired," he added as he introduced himself. "Eleanor mentioned you have the files." I nodded, extracting the USB and documents. "Perfect," remarked a bespectacled woman with a notebook. "I'm Devi Patel, editor at the Pinecrest Gazette. I've been tracking property transfers for months." The fourth person, a man with his laptop open, gave a nod. Tyler Washington. Those cameras at my house aren't just decoration. As Sophia prepared hot chocolate, they explained the Pinnacle development scheme, targeting senior communities, infiltrating HOA boards, and manufacturing violations until homeowners were forced to sell at a loss. Your grandmother moved here on purpose, Devi elaborated. After witnessing the same pattern in 3 counties, she decided to gather inside evidence. Tyler then rotated his laptop to reveal footage of Richard and Karen placing caltrops in Grandma's driveway, followed by shots of them breaking windows later. We've got everything, Marcus declared, but we need your grandmother's case files to legally connect the dots. I pulled the USB from my pocket. Everything's here, but they know I have it now. They'll come for me. Sophia smiled. That's exactly our plan. The 4 seniors laid out their scheme. Each had been compiling different pieces of evidence for months. Judge Marcus has connections in court. Devi can get the story out. Tyler handles surveillance. And Sophia knows every resident affected. But we need one more thing, Devi added. That's where you come in. She spread out a property map of Pinecrest Village. Red X's marked homes pressured into selling, while blue circles pinpointed those currently under threat in the center. A large plot here holds all the properties Pinnacle acquired. This is their true objective, Marcus explained, pointing to plans for a luxury resort. They need just 4 more properties, including your grandmother's cottage. Tomorrow night, there's an emergency HOA meeting, Sophia noted. They plan to vote on foreclosures for delinquent properties. Tyler quickly typed on his laptop. Emails, though poorly encrypted, reveal they're using this meeting to claim legal power to force sales. How did you get their emails? I marveled. I used to be an IT security specialist. Tyler grinned. And Richard uses the same password for everything. His dog's name, plus his birth year. Amateur. A plan took shape as we spoke. We would attend the meeting, rally affected residents, and expose the scam. But we needed Grandma Eleanor there to solidify the legal case. I'll call her, I said, reaching for my phone. No phones, Sophia interjected. They might be tracking you. Use my landline. I dialed as Debbie handed me a newspaper article she'd drafted. The headline read, State Prosecutor uncovers massive housing fraud ring in Pinecrest Village. My eyes widened. You can't publish this yet, I cautioned. Of course not, Devi assured me with a wink. It's for after tomorrow's meeting. Grandma answered on the 3rd ring, pausing before saying, It's too soon. We need more evidence linking Robert Thompson directly. We have it, Tyler announced, showing security footage of Robert meeting Richard behind the community center, exchanging documents. Send that to my secure email, Grandma directed when I explained it, and tell Sophia to activate Protocol Checkmate. Sophia's eyes lit up. She's ready to move. After hanging up, Sophia clarified that Protocol Checkmate meant Grandma would arrive with her Attorney General's team. Everything had to be perfectly timed. As we finalized plans, the lights abruptly went out. Peeking through a window, I saw Karen's SUV slowly cruising by Sophia's house. They're after you, Marcus murmured. Tyler, show our young friend the basement. Tyler led me down to a snug but cozy room. Welcome to our safe house, he smiled. We've sheltered 3 other residents here before tough times hit. As I settled in, Sophia handed me a legal pad. Write down every detail since you arrived. Times, dates, exact words. We need your testimony to be spot on. I began writing, only to pause when I heard a noise upstairs. Minutes later, Sophia emerged, her face ashen. They just updated the HOA newsletter. The meeting's been moved up to tomorrow morning instead of tonight, Marcus frowned. They're trying to rush things before Eleanor can arrive. Can we delay them? I asked. Devi's smile turned sly. "Leave that to me. I have press credentials and a slew of detailed questions that must be answered before any vote." While others adjusted our plan upstairs, I discovered a photo that had slipped from one of the files. It depicted Karen and Richard next to a prison. The caption read, "Thompson visits ex-HOA President James Willis, convicted in a similar scheme, 2022. Clearly this wasn't their first offense. They'd done this before, and someone had already gone to jail. The stakes were higher than I'd imagined. I heard cars pulling up outside. Peering through the small basement window, I saw Richard knocking at Sophia's front door, flanked by two unfamiliar men. One wore a security uniform emblazoned with the Pinecrest Village logo. "Ms. Ramirez?" Richard's voice carried. "We're performing a wellness check on all elderly residents tonight. May we come in at 11? Sophia replied incredulously. "I don't think so." I slumped against the wall, heart racing. This was no longer just about property. With what we'd uncovered, all of us were in peril. Upstairs, I heard Sophia decisively close the door. Moments later, Tyler appeared at the basement stairs. "Pack up," he whispered. "They're watching the house. We must relocate everyone before morning." As I gathered the files, a text buzzed on the burner phone Sophia had provided. It was from Grandma. "Don't go to the meeting. It's a trap. They know who I am." My hands trembled as I watched Karen and Richard through Sophia's kitchen window. They were stuffing official-looking documents into mailboxes, their smiles unnervingly perfect. I ducked as Karen glanced in our direction. "They're delivering foreclosure notices," Sophia murmured. "Special meeting tomorrow night to vote on these properties." My phone buzzed again. Grandma Eleanor's voice, stronger than I'd heard in weeks, said, "I'm coming home now." "We're setting a trap," I gasped. "But your recovery," she interjected, "some things matter more than my hip. I have a team from the Attorney General's office ready. We need them to lay out their entire scheme on record." Judge Marcus leaned forward. "Your grandmother has been building this case for months. Pinnacle Development has already forced out elderly homeowners in 5 communities." "We need to play dumb," Debbie advised, her reporter's notebook filled with dates and names. "Let them think they're winning." Hours later, I helped Grandma Eleanor secretly unpack at Judge Marcus's house. Though she looked smaller than I remembered, her eyes gleamed with determination as she spread files across his dining table. "They made a mistake by targeting me," she said, showing photos of Richard meeting Robert Thompson outside his law office. "They had no idea I'd been investigating Pinnacle since I bought this place." Just then, the doorbell rang. Tyler rushed in with a tiny device. "Got it. An audio recorder hidden as a hearing aid." He handed it to Grandma. "Just press the earpiece once to start recording. We need them to confess everything publicly," she explained. The HOA meeting was our chance. That night, sleep eluded me. What if Karen and Richard uncovered our plan? What if Grandma wasn't strong enough yet? Outside, I noticed a car idling across the street, someone watching the cottage. The next day crawled by. I paced Grandma's living room, rehearsing my lines. At 6:30 p.m., Judge Marcus arrived to drive us to the community center. "Remember," he cautioned, "act shocked and upset when they announce the foreclosures. We need their full confession." Grandma checked her hearing aid and adjusted her blouse. For a moment I saw the formidable prosecutor she once was. Sharp, focused, unstoppable. The community center buzzed with anxious chatter when we arrived. Karen's smile faltered when she spotted Grandma Eleanor leaning on my arm. Richard nearly dropped his gavel. "Eleanor, what a surprise," Karen stuttered. "We weren't expecting you until next month." "I recovered faster than anticipated," Grandma replied sweetly. I couldn't miss an emergency meeting about my own property. Richard quickly regained his composure. Please, take a seat. We're about to begin. Across the room, I saw Sophia, Devi, and 5 other worried elderly neighbors. This had grown beyond Grandma's cottage. Richard banged his gavel. First order, vote on foreclosure proceedings for 7 properties with outstanding violations and unpaid special assessments. My heart pounded as he displayed a spreadsheet with Grandma's cottage listed first, followed by Sophia's house and 5 others. As you can see, Richard continued smugly, these properties have failed to comply with our standards. The board recommends immediate foreclosure. Karen rose, clutching her clipboard. Pinnacle Development has kindly offered to buy these distressed properties at 60% of their market value, sparing homeowners further humiliation. A murmur rippled through the room. I glanced at Grandma, who gave a slight nod. I leapt to my feet. That's robbery. My grandmother's property has no legitimate violations. Richard's face hardened. Young lady, your grandmother's cottage violates 6 bylaws, and she's 3 months behind on special assessments. Special assessments you fabricated last month, I countered. Karen stepped forward. The board's decision is final. These properties hurt our community's value. Robert has investors ready to build modern homes that will boost property values for everyone. Grandma's voice cut through the chaos. It's all about forcing out long-term residents for your husband's development company. Richard slammed his gavel. That's enough. Security, please escort Miss Curtis and her granddaughter. 2 men moved toward us, but hesitated as back doors swung open, revealing suited individuals with visible badges. Ms. Ramirez. Grandma straightened. Actually, she declared, I'm not just Eleanor Curtis, a retired homeowner. I'm Senior Prosecutor Eleanor Curtis of the White Collar Crime Division. Karen collapsed into a chair, her mouth agape. Richard's face twisted in fury. You'll never prove a thing, he spat. Grandma smiled, removing her hearing aid and holding it aloft. I believe I just did. The room erupted in gasps as state police officers filed in behind my grandmother. Despite her cane, Eleanor Curtis stood tall, her gaze fixed on Richard's panicked expression. This isn't what it looks like, Richard stammered, retreating from the projector still displaying him planting spikes in Grandma's driveway. Save it for court, the lead officer said while reading him his rights, as another approached Karen, whose face had turned ashen. I couldn't help but smile as neighbors began whispering, piecing everything together. Mrs. Ramirez squeezed my hand, tears in her eyes. Your grandmother was building this case for all of us, she whispered. Outside, news vans lined up while Grandma's Attorney General team had already alerted reporters about the sting. Devi from the local paper winked at me as she snapped photos. 3 weeks later, Grandma's blue cottage looked revitalized. The roses climbed freely, unburdened by fear of violation notices. Neighbors dropped by with casseroles and thank you cards as news spread of how close Pine Crest Village had come to being swallowed by Pinnacle Development. The DA is offering Richard and Karen a deal if they testify against Robert Thompson, Grandma confided over lemonade on her porch swing. Even so, they'd still face time for property damage and fraud. Judge Marcus stopped by with documents for Grandma to sign. The new HOA bylaws are ready for review, he said proudly. No more loopholes for developers to exploit. What surprised me most was how swiftly the community recovered. Sophia was elected the new HOA president. Tyler installed a complimentary security system for every elderly resident. Even Karen's teenage son came by to apologize and offer to mow Grandma's lawn all summer. You know, Grandma said, watching children play near the for sale sign at the now vacant Thompson house, sometimes family means more than property. I had been planning to retire next month, but now I think I'll stick around a bit longer. There are HOAs across the state that need a cleanup. I couldn't help but smile. Maybe I'll need a research assistant. I'm even considering switching my major to law.